You're listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, Jon Cross.
But how's your weekend going?
The weekend was good, man. It was a good guys' weekend. I had a couple of buddies over, and we just, as you saw, went apeshit watching ridiculous movies, so it was fun.
Yeah, you watched some 80s romps this weekend, man.
Yeah, we did.
You went back to some of my old stomping ground with Hamburger the movie and...
It was good.
Hot Dog and King Frat you watched. Like
ridiculousness. Complete ridiculousness.
It's almost like you were hanging out with Mo Porn there.
I know. Well, a lot of the movies came from his little list that he gave me, so...
Oh, he gave you the list.
Yeah, because I asked him because my buddy Brian has been doing a movie podcast for like a couple years now, and he messaged me like last week because they usually just review like new stuff,
right?
Like new movies, and he's been wanting to do older films, and I've been wanting to do something on my own for a while now too.
Sure.
So we decided to do it, and I wanted to start off with some good classic romps. So I messaged Mo and asked him for a list of some good movies. So we didn't get to watch Splits, though. I was pretty upset about that.
Well, Splits is really hard to find, dude. Splits is...
I got it on eBay. I bought it on VHS off eBay for like $15.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I have I got a VCR because at work we're getting rid of all our old VCRs. So I snagged like 2 or 3 of them to keep for myself.
Nice. Good work, sir.
I had one at home, and I went upstairs to grab it, and I brought it down, and I was like, oh, shit, I don't know if I have the cables for it. And I didn't have the cables for it, so we weren't able to watch the movie. I was pissed.
Oh, that sucks, man. That sucks. We just got a VHS player recorder thing.
Yeah.
Splits is great. I've been trying to get hold of Splits forever. I kind of think that Splits and Hots are my 2 favorites.
I only got about a quarter of the way into Hots before I started to lose my faculties last night because I was drinking quite a bit, so...
so this...
I'll have to rewatch it.
This new podcast, man, tell us all about it. Is it just going to be you and him the whole time?
Yeah, it's just going to be he and I. And, yeah, it's just something that we've been wanting to do I've been wanting to do for a while. I mean, I love guesting with you when I do, but I've been wanting to do something on my own for a while. And I've got a little bit of a background in radio. I did it in college and stuff. And I'd always wanted to get back into it, so...
Okay, so before we go on, Alan, why don't you tell us, who's our guest on this episode of the After Movie Diner? Well, thank you, Jeff. It's John, actually. I'm not listening. On this week's show, Jeff, we have none other than Scott Toomey from the wilds of Massachusetts. Born to Celia and Celia Toomey in 1908, Scott's early years were mainly spent burrowing for truffles and punching Yorkshire Terriers in the face. It was then that he found a deep and abiding love for burying his privates in mounds of matted wolf's fur while watching Little House on the Prairie. This led to his arrest for possession of porcelain models of Michael Landon in the woods of New Hampshire, wearing little but some wolf fur undies and a tank top with Ellen Barkin on it. It was around this time that Scott's urban cowboy problem started, and several bars around Boston reported their mechanical bulls soiled with Toomey residue. He did another stint inside. While there, he met a kindly wizened old gentleman called Colin, who had been in prison since 1878 for smuggling ducklings, but just had a really bad run of luck when all of his appeals attorneys turned out to be Welsh. Colin told Scott of the wonders of cuddling little people in a hammock on a spring afternoon, and since then, Scott has been a changed man, devoting his life to helping others, mainly with their cereal, their chocolate, their roast potatoes, and out of their clothing. Currently studying a course in Sydney Greenbush Studies at the College of whatever the flipping heck it's called, we are happy and proud to welcome this reformed hellraiser to our show. Was any of that true, Alan? I'm still not listening. Kindly get out of my face. So let us talk about Black Gunn and Black Belt Jones.
Which one do you want to do first?
I don't know, dude. Should we tackle what? Black Belt Jones first? I feel like there's slightly less to talk about, just because there's sort of slightly less substance to it. And I
agree.
I don't mean to knock Black Belt Jones, because it is a fun, funky movie, but it's almost pure kind of action chop socky fun. It's not, it doesn't go much deeper than, a bit of revenge here and a bit of, we've got to keep the karate school open and all that kind of thing.
The plot was not very in-depth.
No. But a great cast. And so, yeah, let's start with Jim Kelly and Black Belt Jones.
The great Jim Kelly.
Yeah. I have this on the 4-film favorite set.
Nice.
Which is a great set. You get Hot Potato, Black Samson, Black Belt Jones, and 3 the Hard Way. And I believe that's still like quite cheap to pick up on Amazon. But you can also watch this on the wonderful streaming service Brown Sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So is that how you ended up seeing it, dude?
Not for this one. I did the so I have an Amazon Fire Stick and I hacked it, so
okay.
I can watch a decent amount of things that they have on there. But so that's what I did for Black Belt Jones. But for Black Gunn, I tried to watch it on Brown Sugar, but I couldn't stream it to my TV, and I didn't want to watch it on my iPad, so I just ended up renting it for like $4 on Amazon, which wasn't a big deal. But both of them were quite an experience for me because I've never delved into the blaxploitation film genre. Never, ever, ever.
Right.
It was never something that really, and it was never something that really piqued my interest. But this was fun.
No, definitely. No. What I was interested because I've had obviously Doug on here. Doug and I are sort of both kind of not connoisseurs, but certainly like big fans of this sort of era of filmmaking and can talk with sort of some knowledge and certain passion and give that side of things. And obviously last episode we had the 3 Black Geeks on here and Mo, all of whom, the 3 Black Geeks specifically come from a very cultural place, obviously, with it. But Mo, who, again, like Doug, but also like the 3 Black Geeks, has a certain affinity for these movies and loves them and could speak
I love the way they look.
Right. So I thought, let's get Scott on here because you have no background on it. And what I wanted to kind of highlight, I guess, is my feeling that at the end of the day, they're genre films.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter who's starring in them. I mean, it does in the case of their abilities and their charisma, but in terms of their race or where the film is set or when the film was made is sort of irrelevant. You know what I mean? Like, they're no different to a Chuck Bronson movie, or if you skip forward to the 80s, a Van Damme movie or whatever. They're the same kind of genre film. But so when you say that this has never piqued your interest before, what is your movie background? Like, if you've got 3 genres you could pick that you're going to sit down and watch, what are they?
Okay. I would say that my favorites are probably horror films of the 80s and the 90s and of course the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of 80s, not just teen sex romps, but 80s teen comedies, like the John Hughes films that we've talked about right here on the After Movie Diner podcast.
Indeed.
And and then I don't know that I could choose a third genre because I do like all films. Right. But I guess before knowing you, I didn't have any friends that were I guess as adventurous when they were seeking out movies to watch.
Right. No, I get it. No, and I think it's interesting then. We've kind of spoken up until this point, all the times you've been on the show, we've spoken about stuff that were very much in your wheelhouse.
Yep.
Okay. So that makes sense. That's cool. And yeah, I, one of my big genres, it turns out, is action movies, which in a weird way, I didn't know or kind of hadn't put a name to till I met Doc in a weird way. Because although I'd seen Lethal Weapons and Die Hard, I'd seen probably all the action movies you'd seen. So the ones everyone sees, right? The Lethal Weapons, the Die Hards, and all the rest of it.
Beverly Hills Cop, sure.
Sure. But I'd never kind of gone beyond that into the realm of, Van Damme or Jeff Speakman or Steven Seagal or any of those things. Really, I mean, a little bit, but not much until I got to know Doc. And then obviously when Jackie Brown came out, I think like a lot of people, I was sort of like, oh, what's this Blaxploitation thing from the 70s? I think a lot of people, that kind of piqued my interest. I think I'd already seen Shaft at that point. But I certainly hadn't delved into things like Black Belt Jones, Black Gunn, things like that. I'd definitely seen Hell Up in Harlem and Black Caesar, the two Fred Williamson ones. Okay. But again, kind of Shaft, Hell Up in Harlem, Black Caesar, Bone with Yaphet Kotto, they're more sort of gangster films and or detective films. They're more they could kind of sort of star or cast anybody, to some extent. And there is and they're definitely not what you think of. What you think of when you think of Blaxploitation is sort of what we were talking about last week, which is like the pimps in the loud clothes and the big cars and the
real stereotypical type stuff.
Right. So like Superfly and Willie Dynamite and things like that. And I'm with you to some extent. When I was younger, that sort of thing wouldn't have interested me. Mm-hmm. And so I had seen the gangster film, I'd seen the detective film, because those are genres that I generally like, and I don't care really who's starring in them, and I like Fred Williamson and so on. And it was really with Pam Grier when I started to get into Pam Grier films, and I started to get into her Philippine movies and her Roger Corman films, and then I saw Coffee and I saw those films that I was like, oh, okay, so there's this other thing as well. There's this sort of action, grindhouse exploitation type element to it. And then as I sort of spread my wings and started watching everything, I realized there was action films, westerns, horror films. And I suddenly realized, as I've said on every episode that I've done about it, but I realized Blaxploitation is an era, it's not a genre. Yeah. People tend to go, oh, well, it's all pimps and hookers and drug dealers and gangsters and things like that, and that's what Blaxploitation is. And it's not at all. Blaxploitation is an era at the beginning of the 70s where African Americans were, for the first time, really making their own cinema. Mm-hmm. And so Black Belt Jones, that's just a big way to introduce it, but Black Belt Jones essentially is the obviously the Enter the Dragon, or it's the Bruce Lee films, which were hugely popular both in the African American culture, but just in the culture in general in the 70s. But the Bruce Lee films, which would then later obviously be the Van Damme films, the Seagal films, the Jeff Speakman films, whatever it is. It's just those martial arts films that were becoming big at the time. And they went, well, Jim Kelly's a black belt, and Fred Williamson was a black belt as well. And he never really sort of did chop socky in the same way that Jim Kelly did. But he certainly does like karate chops and punches in some of his films and throws and things. But it was definitely off the back of... obviously Jim Kelly had been in Enter the Dragon, but like off the back of those films that something like Black Belt Jones gets made, and gives Jim Kelly the chance to not only star in a film, but also to show off his karate work. And after this one, he is then in Three the Hard Way, Take the Hard Ride, Hot Potato, Black Samurai, Black Belt Jones 2, and this sort of sees him all the way through into the early 80s, before he sort of gives up for a while. Yeah. And he never really kind of continued in the way that Fred, Pam, and Jim Brown did. But he was definitely in the 70s that kind of group of people, in that kind of group. So when you first sat down to watch Black Belt Jones, dude, having set it up like that, and I apologize, but first of all, what was your history with martial arts and or action movies of that ilk? And secondly, what did you think you were like letting yourself in for? What did you think you were going to be seeing? Okay,
well, before I watched these two movies, embarrassingly, my only experience with Blaxploitation movies would be the spoofs, like I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, or even Black Dynamite. Like those would be, and maybe even The Last Dragon. I would think that those three movies would be like the only, quote unquote, Blaxploitation type of films that I had seen, and two out of three of them are kind of, well, maybe all three of them are kind of spoofs,
right,
in a way. But in terms of my experience with martial arts movies, I've actually always been a big martial arts fan. I got into Bruce Lee. I think I caught The Last Dragon on TV once when I was probably in junior high school, and seeing that movie then led me to seek out Bruce Lee movies: Chinese Connection, Fist of Fury, Enter the Dragon, all the good ones.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I was a big Van Damme guy when I was a kid, and The Perfect Weapon with Jeff Speakman was like one of my favorite movies to watch when I was a kid. So martial arts movies I've always loved martial arts movies. When you suggested these two movies to watch, I looked Black Belt Jones up on IMDb and saw that Jim Kelly starred in it, and I knew him from Enter the Dragon. So I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be cool to see Jim like in his element, carrying a movie on his own instead of being a side character in a Bruce Lee movie. Yeah. So I was pretty excited about that. And of course, seeing, his skills, I guess you could say, in Enter the Dragon, I was excited to see the stunt work and the fight choreography for this movie too. But the funny thing is I think I expected a more serious movie.
Right.
I didn't know that it was going to be basically an action comedy, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, no. Well, it was
a lot of fun.
They always whip in a little bit of humor, and they always whip in like a little bit of social message. I can't say that Black Belt Jones has a ton of social message. I guess Gloria Hendry's character is, don't underestimate me just because I'm a woman, I guess, right, has that aspect to it, as a lot of the sort of kick-ass women in these films did. Even Willie Dynamite, which we were talking about last time, has the lead character is not Willie Dynamite at all. It's Diane Sands, who is the lead female in the film, and is certainly the verbal and mental ass kicker. And then you have Pam, obviously, who is then followed by people like Gloria Hendry and Tamara Dobson. Gloria Hendry, of course, who would show up in what they call the Blaxploitation Bond, which is Live and Let Die.
Aha!
As Rosie, is it Rosie Carver? I think it's Rosie Carver. The character
they just have her listed as Rosie on IMDb. But that was the other interesting thing, though, was when I was watching Black Belt Jones, and I'm like, oh, I recognize them from Live and Let Die. I recognize that guy from Live and Let Die, because there's another actor in here who was in Live and Let Die as well. But I forget which.
The little fat guy.
Yes,
a lot of the same guys in those movies. So you see repetition all the time. You only have to click on one of these guys on IMDb to check out their listing, and Gloria Hendry is in Black Caesar, Hell Up in Harlem, Black Belt Jones, a lot of those films, and Across 110th Street, Slaughter's Big Ripoff. She's in a ton of them, and then like you say, in Live and Let Die, the guy who plays Whisper, that's it. It's Earl Jolly Brown is the chap you're talking about. He plays Jelly in Black Belt Jones. He plays Whisper in Live and Let Die. And he goes right into like Beverly Hills Cop. He's in Beverly Hills Cop and a couple of other things. Not a huge filmography, but he's been in some very prominent films. Let's just let that ambulance go by. It's New York. What can I do? Every time I sit down to fucking record, we get this shit. But yeah, so you went in and you were expecting it to be a little bit more serious, but you were happily pleased that there was like a kind of comedy to it.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought it was I know I say it a lot when I'm on your show, but it was a really fun movie to watch, and it was the acting is par for the course, I guess you could say, but everybody, I think it just seemed like everybody knew what they were doing. They knew what they were getting themselves into. They weren't taking themselves too seriously. It was a fun, chop socky type of flick, and I really enjoyed it.
Right, and that's the other thing. I mean, certainly 74 is sort of a couple of years into this era, and they already know, because everyone's certainly involved in this, has been to see films either on 42nd Street or on Hollywood and Vine, depending on which coast you're on, but where the audiences of the time, especially to Hong Kong action pics and also to some of the blaxploitation films, were reacting to them in a very enthusiastic, fun, vocal way. Like, they were event movies in that regard. You went along in order to, like, just be thrilled and entertained and so on. And, you know, it's only in really the advent of video that you can kind of look back at them and actually see some of the depth that's in some of these films, and some of the films we've covered both this time round and the previous time we did the blaxploitation era. Even in films that look fluffy on the surface, have some stuff going on in them. But this was definitely directed in a, how do we take Enter the Dragon you know, those kind of films and transport them to a blaxploitation California kind of setting, because this is set in California.
A lot of recognizable scenery in this movie, for me anyway. Definitely.
And it's directed by Robert Klaus, so it's even directed by the same guy who would do Enter the Dragon. And would go on to do Game of Death, and then would go on to do China O'Brien and China O'Brien 2, as well as a lot of people's favorite cheesy 80s action flick, Jim Carter. So Robert Klaus was definitely a guy who, let's say, knew his stuff when he came to this, or was certainly a workman-style director who could put together an action movie that was slickly paced and, you know, humorously and entertainingly presented. And I like the fact that every time you're on the show, you're like, oh, this was a really entertaining movie, because that's kind of what I like. You know, I don't really have a genre. I'll watch a sci-fi movie, I'll watch an action movie, I'll watch a horror movie, it doesn't matter. But I got to be entertained. And you know, and I like this is a nice, lean 85 minutes action comedy. Like you say, it knows what it is. It sets up its not
a lot of dialogue.
Right, it sets up its premise, and then it's essentially, well, what do audiences want to see? They want to see Jim Kelly kicking ass and taking names. And all right, they want to see Gloria Hendry standing next to him kicking ass and taking names. You know what I mean? And if that means that we set up a situation where the mafia are trying to buy out an old dude's karate school, then who has to call in Black Bolt Jones and his daughter Sydney in order to save the day, then let's set that up and away we go, because that just means that we have a karate school going up against the mafia, and who doesn't love that, right?
That's right.
So what were some standout scenes for you, sir, in this first movie?
Oh, gosh. The final scene clearly was... I honestly don't think I couldn't believe my eyes when I was watching it,
right?
Because it was pretty long. It was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, and they were fighting in a giant sea of car wash bubbles, which was completely and totally ridiculous to me. I thought it was so funny.
So just to explain to people who haven't seen the film, there's a car chase that ends up at a it's like a dump truck, garbage truck parking area, I guess. So they're like the city dump or something, I guess. I don't know. And there's all these garbage trucks, and there's obviously a car wash there or a truck wash there, and the cars go through it, which creates all these bubbles, which miraculously creates about 3 feet of bubbles throughout the entire parking structure. And while Jim Kelly beats people up repeatedly in the bubbles, Gloria Hendry is hoisting them up over her head into a garbage truck and mashing them in a garbage truck, essentially, although the police then drive the truck away as if they're all somehow contained inside. But I thought that crushed the garbage, so I would have assumed they'd all be killed, but I don't know.
I don't know, that particular truck maybe just kind of dumped the trash into the bigger part of the truck. Who knows? But it is nice to think that maybe they got squished.
But there was no indication they did. There was no
there wasn't.
blood or anything coming out of it. It was all done very slapstick.
Right. Oh, that was the other thing that really jumped out at me, was that there was no blood in this movie. Not even a teeny tiny bit. Which I thought was interesting, considering that it's rated R. I don't know. Nothing jumps out at me as I'm thinking about it right now. Nothing jumps out at me that would say, "Oh yeah, this is a rated R movie." I didn't find the language to be that severe.
There's no nudity, right?
There's no nudity. The fight scenes aren't like super violent. There's no blood, so that's pretty interesting to me. I don't know why it would have gotten a rated R, because I always thought that the rating system was a little bit more lax back in the day, seeing as how they show boobs in a PG movie called The Beastmaster,
right.
But Black Belt Jones gets a rated R. So I thought that was kind of interesing.
Look at it. Army of Darkness, when it first came out, was rated NC-17, and that has talking skeletons in it. So yeah, it's all a bit. I think also, from what I've understood from previous rating debacles in the US, it comes down to the politics of the movie and what the movie is, rather than often what it contains. For example,
what I was thinking that it might be. Yeah.
You look at the slasher movies.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th are all cut to hell because the MPAA decided to make an example of them because they were high-profile slasher movies. Yeah. You and I know there are other slasher movies that were either rated PG or R that have way more gore and way more violent effects in them, and eye pops and head crushes and all sorts of stuff that aren't edited at all, because the MPA weren't trying to make an example of them, right, because they saw them as B movies, whereas the Friday the 13th were made by a major studio. So it may be the case that because some other movies of the Blaxploitation era had been rated a slightly higher rating, and because also they wanted to get a certain audience in to see this. In other words, they didn't necessarily want kids going in to see Black Belt Jones, even though there's nothing in it they couldn't see. They wanted to gear it towards an adult audience, and putting an R rating on it, even though there's no content in it that really deserves it, kind of allows that. The third thing is probably, and I don't know what it was like here, but I know in the UK that when the Hong Kong films came out, and then later when there were films that featured things like nunchucks and things like that, even right down to, by the way, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they were renamed in the UK Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. They weren't allowed to be ninjas, and any sequence with nunchucks was cut out. So it may just be that karate movies, Hong Kong movies, the violence was enough. Like the idea that he goes around and beats up 17 people in one scene or whatever it is enough for it to get an R rating. I don't know.
Bullshit politics.
Yeah, it is. It's all bullshit politics. But I think certainly with the MPA, from everything I've looked into, there is no rhyme or reason. At least when you look at the BBFC, which is the certificate censorship board in the UK, at least they drew a line across certain things. They were like excessive gore, no. Sexual violence, no. Extreme weaponry in terms of like ninja stars and nunchucks, no. But at least they made like that line. At least it was like across the board. So, Enter the Ninja and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got the same treatment. It wasn't like they were like, well, we need to take one out and keep the other. It was across the board. They had their standards, and that's what they lived up to. The MPAA seems to just pick on certain movies. That's how I've kind of heard it. Like, Kevin Smith gets told to take some stuff out of his films in order to get a rating, but Something About Mary or American Pie is allowed to have, graphic nudity and cum jokes and whatever. So it's just, I think they pick on certain people. I really do, from everything I've heard.
I don't like
maybe,
it.
Maybe that. No, I don't like it either. And anyone going, well, this is an R movie, I can't show my kids. I would happily show my kids Black Belt Jones.
Hell yeah.
In fact,
Hell
I
yeah.
think my kids would fucking enjoy it. Like people punching each other in bubbles. It's like an episode of the A-Team or something. It's great.
It's almost like a live action cartoon in a way.
Yeah, definitely. And there's even that, like the hilarious sequence where they decide that they have to have a love affair crop up between Jim Kelly and Gloria Hendry. So there's this incredible montage that starts off with them fighting, right? And
you're talking about the scene on the beach?
Yeah, isn't there a little bit of nudity when they knock over the tent? Don't two naked people run out of the tent?
Oh, I don't remember. It's very, very possible.
I think there's an implication when they knock over a beach tent that there are two people having sex in the tent, but I don't really think you see anything. Maybe you see a couple of butts as they run away, but I mean, it's nothing like you say you wouldn't see in Airplane or Police Academy or something.
But I was going to bring up the beach, the overextended, overlong beach scene with the two of them kind of like playfully wrestling and fighting each other on the beach.
Yeah, that goes up.
I was like watching that, and it just kept like, I'm like looking at my watch as it's happening, and I'm like, wow, this scene is like really, really long, and I get what they're trying to do, but it didn't have to be this long.
I mean, it's funny. There for an 85-minute movie, and this is not a huge criticism of it.
Right.
There are a couple of set pieces where you're like, no, we get it. It's fine.
Yeah, that was one of them.
And yeah, but it was interesting because I went to see John Wick 2 recently, and I'm going to review that film later with Doc.
Nice.
And again, not a huge criticism of it, but there were a couple of sequences in that where I'm like, you know what? I've kind of got the point. You've shot 15 people. You don't need to shoot another 35. No, oh wait, no, you need to shoot another 75. Oh wait, no, you're going to shoot 110. Like it kind of was a bit like that in the same way with Black Belt Jones. The other thing that I noticed in Black Belt Jones, I don't know if you saw this, but the same stunt people who were dressed up as goons got beaten up multiple times because Robert Klaus didn't bother to have them change their outfits. So you see the same dude. There's a dude wearing a white T-shirt with blue trim, like blue neck, blue sleeve trim, and a pair of tight 70s jeans, who's got a bit of a gut, who gets beaten up, I think, like on 5 different occasions in 5 different sequences wearing exactly the same stuff. And I don't know whether he was meant to be a character, but we were never introduced to him. He just gets indiscriminately beaten up. And even in the foam sequence at the end, stands up and gets beaten up again like 5 times in a row. I was just like, wow, this is incredible, you know?
Yeah, there was quite a few guys in that movie that took several beatings.
But were there any other moments that stood out to you?
I would. Those are the two pretty much. I watched it. I think I watched it. Did I watch it last weekend or the weekend before? So I watched it a while ago. But those two scenes definitely, and it did happen a couple of times throughout the movie where a scene went on a little bit longer than it probably needed to. But the end fight scene, the first time I wouldn't know what to call them. I guess like the militant. The black militant fellas showed up and that was another thing that was interesting to me too, was that they had
like the Black Panthers kind of group.
Yeah, they had 2 black groups kind of going against each other, which I mean, I don't know, dude. I'm like a skinny white guy that grew up in the Massachusetts suburbs, okay? I have like no exposure to a lot of that stuff, especially when I was growing up. I mean, now a little bit more than before, but I just thought that was interesting that they had two black groups going against each other. And I guess maybe I expected it to be a little bit more like Black Gunn, where it was like a black versus white kind of thing. I don't know why, but
I think isn't it that the mafia are using like a local drug dealer and his hoods to like shake down the karate school, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. Okay, so I woke up early one Saturday morning and couldn't get back to sleep. So I put my iPhone on the side of the bed and put my headphones in, and I watched both of these movies back to back on Brown Sugar. Now, I had seen Black Belt Jones a couple of times before, but it's not the kind of movie where the plot is abundantly clear. You know who the good guys and the bad guys are, but I couldn't quite tell you sort of what any of their affiliations are, you know?
Right.
But you're right. There's the big dude with the beard and the loud shirts who's always trying to like pot pool balls into people's teeth, right?
Yeah.
So there's that dude, and he is kind of used to shake down the karate school, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I'm reading it right now, and it's the Mafia Don and Pinky. Pinky is their representative in the urban area.
Right. Yeah.
And Pinky's the one that tries to shake down Papa Bird and get him to sell his karate school.
Papa Bird, played by the wonderful Scatman Crothers. Everyone will know that from The Shining.
That's right.
As well as some other wonderful performances in a variety of films. He's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, also with Jack Nicholson.
No, he plays a
orderly.
Yes, an orderly.
Yeah, he plays an orderly. Around this time, he's in Slaughter's Big Ripoff. That's one of the famous ones he's in. Black Belt Jones, he's in Truck Turner. He is in a bunch of TV stuff. I don't know what else he's in Friday Foster. He's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Friday Foster, The Shootist.
The Aristocats.
Silver Streak, he shows up in. So yeah, he's in a ton of stuff and has that wonderful name and wonderful presence. So yeah, I was going to talk about that a little bit. The acting, like Jim Kelly is cool as fuck. Like just on screen, he just has an incredible presence. But he's not like a wonderful dramatic actor or even a particularly strong comedic actor. He's just cool as fuck.
Yeah.
Gloria Hendry, I feel like, does the heavy lifting where sort of acting, quote unquote, is concerned. She's a much stronger actor in the more traditional sense, I mean.
Yeah, she's got a fair amount of dialogue. Jim Kelly has like hardly any dialogue. She has quite a bit, I think, actually. So, yeah, she was great.
And isn't Jim Kelly meant to be like an old agent or something?
Like not necessarily this, but it's the only example I can think of, like an FBI agent or some kind of like law enforcement agent, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, because he's not affiliated with the karate school. Why are the...
You're right, because in the beginning they have that whole big scene, and they're all like, "Oh, we better call Black Belt Jones," and they call him, and he's like, "No, I'm good. I think he says something like, I don't do that anymore," or something like that. But it's also, to me, it was inferred he's when they call him, he's at some kind of a TV show taping or whatever, and to me it was inferred that he is like a bodyguard of these two other guys that were there. Maybe, I don't know. So maybe he used to do that kind of thing, but he doesn't anymore, and now he's like private security for people or something. I have no idea.
It was one of those things where, you know, nowadays in like a Jason Statham film or something, that's one line of dialogue. You know, he'll be whatever his character is, a chauffeur or a guy who's homeless or whatever it is, but then they'll have one line of dialogue. Well, he used to be in the SAS. So what that is, what that line of dialogue means is when he does something ludicrously superhuman, it's because he was in the SAS.
Oh, yeah.
And the same goes for Black Belt Jones. I think they set it up simply to say, like, this is why he can do everything he can do because he used to be in the FBI, as if all FBI agents have the kind of karate training he does.
The government used to trust him to get them out of sticky situations.
Right. So there's a lot of there's a lot of ins and outs and setups and things like that, and I'm not sure I particularly go deep into any of that. My enjoyment of the movie is just the incredible soundtrack and the, like you say, the
funky.
It's very funky. It's very cool, and like you say, the kind of fun, entertaining, slapstick karate sequences. That's really what it is. Would you recommend this if you like?
Oh hell yeah, absolutely. If somebody. Nobody would ever do this, but if somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, what what I'm thinking about, delving into some Blaxploitation movies. What I mean, aside from the fact that these are the only two I've ever watched, but yeah, this one I would definitely recommend, just because it was so fun. It reminded me of almost kind of an amalgamation of Enter the Dragon and The Last Dragon. It was to me, it was kind of like those two movies put together. And
it is, and The Last Dragon owes a ton of stuff to this, and also other Blaxploitation and Hong Kong movies. So if someone came up to you and said, like, have you seen any good action movies lately? Would this be one you mentioned, or would it only be if they were interested in, like, 70s African American filmmaking, or would this just be one you would put out there just as an action movie, like a comedy action movie?
Yeah, if they were looking for recommendations for older action movies, like if they had come up to me and told me, oh yeah, I just watched Die Hard and Lethal Weapon and all that stuff, and they were looking for more. They were looking for suggestions of things that maybe not a lot of people knew about or whatnot, I would definitely throw this one out there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool, man. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that, and I'm glad Black Belt Jones. That was the first one you watched, was it?
That was the first one I watched. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that was your first ever. I'm glad. I do hope genuinely that you not only listen to the episodes that I've done with the other guys about these movies, and it's not just the last two. If you go back a couple of years, I did 4 episodes. I did one on Shaft, all 3 Shafts. I did one on, I think, Bucktown and Friday Foster. I did one on the Slaughter films, which is sort of Jim Brown's character, Slaughter and Slaughter's big ripoff. And I did one other episode. I forget what it is now. But I would.
Well, I've got Brown Sugar now, so I'm gonna be doing some work over the next couple of weeks, probably.
Definitely, man. Check it out, because I like I always say, it's misrepresented as a genre. It's not a genre. It's a series of genres in an era. Yeah. So if you like action movies, just go for the ones that look like action movies. Or if you like westerns, go for the ones that are westerns or whatever. And if you're not so much like if the and I'm with you in this to some extent, the big hatted pimp, drug dealers are the heroes kind of films, or like pimps, wife beaters, or whatever are the heroes of the movie. I'm not as interested as that. Like Willie Dynamite, I would recommend, because it kind of flips that on its ear. Like it kind of upends your expectations of what that movie is. But stuff like Superfly and some of the other ones, they're good to watch if you want something that's kind of cultural from that era, but they're not particularly my first go-tos. I like the Jim Browns, Fred Williamson, Jim Kelly, like action films or westerns or things. And then secondary to that, I like some of the horror films, the Scream, Blackula Scream, and Black Frankenstein and things like that. They're good fun. And again, I think that a lot of these movies, because they're, Scream, Blackula Scream, or Black Frankenstein, or Black Belt Jones, or Black Gunn, I think a lot of that, like the naming convention, kind of excludes them from people's minds, not due to race, but just due to, like, they like, oh, those are those movies. Yeah. Like, people don't mention Black Belt Jones in the same breath that they mentioned Hard Target or whatever. I mean, obviously, Hard Target is 15 years later, and it has more production value, and it has more money, and it has more flash and whatever. But essentially, it's the same thing. It's a martial artist going up against a bunch of guys. And just, people watch Enter the Dragon with such reverence, and imbue not only Bruce Lee, but also Chuck Norris and people like that with these sort of iconic status because of that. But the martial arts in that is, as in terms of movie martial arts, maybe not martial arts in reality, but in terms of movie martial arts, is as primitive as Black Belt Jones in terms of what we're used to seeing in contemporary cinema. I mean, if you put this, if you're expecting The Raid when you go into Black Belt Jones, or if you're expecting Above the Law with Steven Seagal when you go into Black Belt Jones, it's not going to be the same thing. So the sophistication of how we filmed martial arts and how we film action movies, both the Hong Kong films and the Western films, have both exponentially improved and exponentially become more glossy and thing. So I think that if people can watch Enter the Dragon and see it for the masterful and impressive film that it is, they need to be able to do the same with whether it's Black Belt Jones or whether it's Hot Potato or whether it's Three the Hard Way or any of those films, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think they all come from a similar era, and they all come from an era where we're trying to figure out, like, how is it we put martial arts, even though it's obviously ancient for Asia, it's fairly new to Western eyes. How do we put that on the screen? And I think Black Belt Jones is as good an example of that as any of the others.
I'm with you.
Excellent, sir.
The After Movie Diner with Jon Cross will return right after this.
Hey guys, this is JD from the In Session Film Podcast. Every week on our show, you can join my co-host Brendan and I as we review the latest films that's out in theaters. It also inspires us to discuss a top 3 list of some sort, and we have a lot of other fun movie discussions as well. It's always a blast. And we also have a show on Fridays called our Extra Film Podcast. This is a show that gives us the space to talk about the latest indies and art films and other classics that we normally just don't get to talk about on our main show. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Player FM, and more. In fact, you can just see everything about us, including our social medias, at InSessionFilm.com. So join us every week. We'd absolutely love to have you.
Hi, I'm Brian,
And I'm Adam.
and we encourage you to come listen to a very special program.
A podcast, unlike anything you've heard before. Right, Brian?
What? No, dude. Everyone has a podcast.
Everyone has a podcast.
What's our show about?
We talk about comedy,
Sports,
science,
topical news,
meat hunting,
music,
podcasting,
Matthew McConaughey,
fishing,
health and fitness,
Horsecocks.
technical difficulties,
buffaloes,
popular culture.
maybe a little too much about the Asians.
Check us out on Twitter at EHAP Podcast. Listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher, or through our website, www.ehappodcast.com. Contact us directly through ehappodcast@gmail.com. Like and subscribe on YouTube under EHAP Podcast. We're also on Facebook and Grindr.
Really? We're on Facebook?
I think so.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling.
Well, let us go on to Black Gunn, which is a film. And again, this should show you the two completely different moods, two completely different genres can exist within the same era, because this is a far more serious film, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. The plot is much more involved. The plot's much more involved, but it still isn't like, it's not like we're watching Inception or anything like that.
No, right, no.
But it is definitely a more involved plot. There's a little bit more story to it. And I like that Jim Brown plays a kind of in some ways, he plays kind of a reluctant hero. I really enjoyed that. And I thought he was really good in it, honestly. I mean, he doesn't say much, but he's Jim Brown, Hall of Fame football player. I didn't really expect a whole lot from him, but I thought he was really good.
No, and
Dina and I actually just got done watching it not even like an hour ago. So,
and did she enjoy it?
She loved it too. Yeah, she thought it was super fun, and she was just like, oh my god, it was really different, and it was really fun, and yeah, she enjoyed it.
No, what is incredible when you think of sort of sports stars becoming actors, which is nothing new, and also nothing that we've given up. There's plenty of sports stars that have gone on to be actors, but what strikes you certainly about him and Fred Williamson is just how good they are at acting. I mean, and not only that is because there's that indefinable quality that they say Hollywood stars have, whether it's the Hollywood stars of the 30s and 40s or whether it's today. And it's the indescribable, like the camera just loves them. They're just charismatic on screen no matter what they're doing. And Jim Brown has that in just fucking tons of that. You know what I mean? Yep. And this is interesting because it is it is a noir film. It is like you say, a reluctant hero film. It's not an action film in the way that the trailer and the poster and everything else kind of indicate it's going to be. It's not even a revenge vigilante thriller in the way that something like a Death Wish is. It kind of goes that way eventually, but it takes an hour of the movie before, Jim Brown really starts going out and kind of cracking skulls in any kind of big way. Yeah,
it's a good kind of build up and delivery almost, because you're just kind of almost maybe not quite the exact impact that it has, but it's almost kind of the same as in Fists of Fury, when you're just waiting for Bruce Lee to finally just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna kick everybody's ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But for this movie, it was kind of the same thing, where you're just like, all right, man, Jim Brown, he's kind of staying out of it right now. But sooner or later, he's gonna start getting involved, and he's gonna start laying the smackdown. And then when he does, it's like, yeah, let's go, let's do it.
And what's really interesting as well is that this is definitely one of the movies that has a lot of sorry, what was I saying? Oh, this is one of the movies that definitely has a racial society undertone thing. This is definitely one of those films.
A lot of cringy dialogue in some ways.
Well, no, but what I mean is that the interesting thing about the film is there is the Jim Brown's brother is a member of a black militant group called in the movie Black Action Group.
Yep, BAG.
And their thing is essentially to take it to the man in any way they can. So they're going to rob banks and they're going to beat people up. And there's no thought it's not like the Black Panthers, which had a more sort of political manifesto. And yes, they were violent, and yes, they believed in certain things that wouldn't necessarily be what Martin Luther King would suggest. But there was they were at least a politically minded group. Yeah. This group seems a lot less organized and a lot more criminal just for the sake of being criminal, and they want to justify that by saying like, well, we're going to steal from white guys, or we're going to beat up white guys, or we're going to fuck over white businesses, or whatever it is. And that's as far as their politics seems to go. I don't remember them sort of getting any deeper than that, really.
No, they didn't.
Jim Brown, on the other hand, he's a business owner.
Yep.
And he is, his way of kind of sticking it to the man, as it were, is to run his business and be successful and get his big mansion and all the rest of it. However, it is understood that his is an African-American only establishment. There is a case where I think, is it the governor who is being sort of congressman, that's it, who's being sort of paid off by the mafia, tries to come in and to his place and sit down and whatever, and he is very clear to him, like, no, we don't have your sort in here. And he's like, are you discriminating against me? He's like, yes, of course I'm discriminating against you. Like, and his thing is more like, well, I'm just going to do unto you what you guys did to us, which was not let us into your establishments and tell us we had to drink from a different fountain or go to the bathroom in a different bathroom or not be able to work the jobs that, and I'm fine. I'm going to be that guy. But he doesn't want to, he's not a take it to the street, Black Power march kind of character.
He does it in his own way.
Yeah, and he's in a more sort of diplomatic way. And his brother, he doesn't condemn his brother. He understands where his brother's actions and beliefs are coming from. But he certainly warns him that what he's doing is kind of stupid and reckless, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not the best idea, and it's and if he fucks up, he's going to get himself killed. So I think that also goes into it as well.
And so the crux of the movie is that his brother, along with some bag members, knock over a mafia bookmaking operation, and in the process of stealing the money, also steal essentially a bit like Al Capone. They steal like the records. They steal like the books and the records and the who's getting paid from who and who's doing what. So and it's put in Gunn's safe in his mansion. And so when his brother is killed by some mafia hoods that are hired by Martin Landau, of all people.
The great Martin Landau.
The great Martin Landau in this movie. He's phenomenal. Gunn has two situations. First of all, he has leverage because he has the books. And secondly, he has a desire for vengeance because obviously they killed his brother. So that's kind of the two things that then go on. And the assassin... the head assassin by the crime syndicate or the mafia, whatever you want to call them, is hired is none other than another Bond alumni, Bruce Glover, father to Crispin Glover.
Whoa, oh my gosh. Okay, that makes total sense now because they do kind of look alike, so that's funny.
And they're both fucking crazy.
Yeah, a little bit. Mr. Wint.
Mr. Wint from Diamonds Are Forever. So it's a much more twisty, turny, involved, socially aware film than Black Belt Jones. So what did you? So go through it with me, dude. Like you sit down, you start to watch it after Black Belt Jones. What are you thinking? Are you thinking this is going to be like just Jim Brown going around and kicking ass? What do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much did think that was what it was going to be. I didn't expect it to have. I didn't expect it to. Geez, it's so funny because I'm all like, I didn't expect it to have such an involved plot, but it still doesn't really. It was just more of an involved plot than Black Belt Jones.
I mean, it's as involved as most sort of revenge thrillers or gangster films.
Yeah,
there isn't. I feel like they make an effort. There's a script. There's a reason why they're making the film. There are some social elements. There's some dramatic elements. There's some action elements. Like I feel like it's a movie that they've put a fair decent ton of effort in. I mean, I kind of feel like this is Jim Brown's answer to Black Caesar, Hell Up in Harlem meets Death Wish. That's kind of his answer to those movies.
Yeah. That sounds about right. I love seeing all the actors that I recognized again. I don't know why it's so weird to me to see them in other movies, but it's like it was that time period, so obviously you're going to see some people that you recognize from other films from that time period. It was another one of those instances where I honestly didn't really know what to expect when I started it. I was just thinking, all right, here we go. And it's going to be, I assumed it was going to be a black versus white thing, which in this particular instance it was. But yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly kind of speechless about it because I did really enjoy it and I had a lot of fun watching it and I'm still processing it.
Yeah, so you just finished this before we started to record.
Yeah, like about an hour ago.
So I have to say, when I watched this, and this was, I think, my second watch of this particular movie, because I like it. I can't say it's my favorite. I think Slaughter is a much better Jim Brown film. Mm-hmm. I think
it's a little slow. It's slow,
and I also feel that the plot, while the basic plot is very easy to figure out, but there is a lot of who's on whose side, who's being bought out, who isn't, who is directly responsible, who isn't. There's a lot of stuff like that in the film that I'm not 100% clear on, even now, having seen it a couple of times. It's not entirely clear who is in cahoots with who, because there are a lot of times where you think someone's on Gunn's side and he isn't, and then you think someone's not on Gunn's side and he turns out to be. So that always slightly confused me, and that's more down to a lack of obvious scripting, I guess. That's sort of a lot of these 70s movies, and it's not just Blaxploitation movies, but a lot of 70s movies in general leave a lot to the audience to kind of work through. And you have to remember, like, I sat watching this in a I can't sleep kind of haze on a Saturday morning. So that may be why I didn't pick up on absolutely everything. And the last time I watched it before then was probably 10 years ago or thereabouts. So there's that, which always kind of takes me out of a film, because I'm sat there going, wait a minute, is the Congress guy on his side? Is he not on his side? Is that guy on his side? I can't quite figure it out. There's some pretty impressive fight scenes, you know, but again, like, I don't remember him. He doesn't kill Bruce Glover, does he? But he does beat the living shit out of him, and then he's just out of the movie. Yep.
Yeah, he just kind of disappears. It was kind of weird,
right? I'm right in that, right? We don't see him. So, yeah. We don't see him like die, but we don't see him come back either.
No,
he literally. They go into a room and he destroys the room with Bruce Glover as if Bruce Glover was like a feather duster or something.
Exactly, yeah.
But he throws him into shelving units and onto tables and smashes through.
Oh my God, now that you're saying it, I'm thinking about it. Like, yeah, that whole scene happened. It was at Bruce Glover's character's mother's apartment, which I thought was pretty funny. Totally this is my mother's house. You better have respect for it. What?
Yeah, right.
But that whole fight scene happened, and then all of a sudden, he was gone. He wasn't involved anymore. I thought that was kind of strange. I do have to, of course, point out again, all these actors are great, but I have to point out the great Bernie Casey, who was also a star in I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. But I remember him, what the fuck do I remember him most from? Revenge of the Nerds.
Right?
I'm like thinking, no, I love Bernie Casey. I think he's awesome. And it was cool seeing him in this movie. So
Bernie Casey, who is also in Never Say Never Again, which is not an official James Bond film.
Not part of the official canon, right?
It is a Bond film. He's in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, of course.
That's right. Yep.
He's in Under Siege. So he has been in a Seagal movie. Mm-hmm. He is in The Mouth of Madness, so he is in a John Carpenter movie. He is in Street Night, so he is in a Jeff Speakman movie to bring the Speakman back into it. He was in Hammer, Slammer, and Slade, which was a TV movie by the makers of I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. That never, by Keenan Ivory Wayans, that never went full series with it. They just got an extended pilot. I believe it's on Brown Sugar. I believe it's on there, and it's just 60 minutes long, but it's a continuation. Jim Brown is in there as Slammer, and Bernie Casey is in there as John Slade. It's a continuation of their characters from I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, I believe.
He has great names in all the movies that he's in, though. John Slade,
Kirkland Smith in Another 48 Hours,
Colonel Rumbus in Spies Like Us.
Yeah.
There was another good one down here. Thorny Thornberry in Trapper John M.D.
He's Detective Tom Reese in Steel Justice.
There you go.
Starring the wonderful Martin Cove as John Steele.
Nice.
But no, Bernie Casey, definitely, I mean, not iconic in the way that Fred, Jim, and Pam are, but certainly has, in terms of being in major motion pictures, probably has the most successful career as a character actor, essentially. because he crops up in these movies mostly in character roles. He very rarely is a lead role in any of the films.
Look up his filmography and see what other stuff he was in around this time. See if he showed up in any of these other Blaxploitation movies, because I don't.
He did. He showed up in Hitman, the film Hitman, as Tyrone Tackett. He's also in what I mentioned earlier, Cleopatra Jones.
Okay. Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, he's in that. Again, they kind of redid a lot of the Universal monsters, but as African American stories.
Yeah.
And again, as silly as that sounds, or as on the nose, I guess, as that sounds, I would suggest watching them because they actually use the characters to bring in issues within their own community, which is actually fascinating and actually elevates the movies well above their, again, slightly ridiculous titles, which I kind of spoke about.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
But yeah, Bernie Casey is definitely one from this era that is, I think, most recognizable to a wider audience.
Yeah, definitely.
You could argue Pam Grier is as well, certainly post Jackie Brown, to a wider audience. And by a wider audience, yes, I mean white.
Yeah.
And I mean white people who don't go beyond their own kind of genres or eras.
Like me.
Like you, but I feel like that's only because you grew up. It's not out of any. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's just you were like, no, I don't want to watch those movies. I don't know.
No, it wasn't that. It was just. I don't know. When I would go to the video store, I was looking for other stuff. It was that was pretty much it, really. It was just that I never thought to seek out or delve into this.
But you don't like exploitation movies in general. Like, forget Blaxploitation movies. You don't tend to watch weird Italian alien films or zombie films, or like you don't watch giallo films or but you watch Hong Kong. I mean, you've seen like some of the classic action stuff, I guess. But you've not, it's not like you delve into, like me and Mo and other people watch mad B movies. Like, you'll watch them if we tell you to watch them.
I'd love to, delve into more of them. Yeah, but they're like, they're not my go-to, I guess we'll say.
And I think what you'll find, dude, especially if you start up this other podcast, is like me. I thought when I started a podcast that I had seen a ton of movies. Yeah. Like, I thought I was Mr. Movies. And not just A pictures, but plenty of B pictures. Like, I thought I'd seen loads of straight-to-video stuff, and I thought I knew 70s and 80s horror, for example. And then I met Mo, and then I met Doug, and then I met... John and Axel over at Profondo Cinema, and I met a whole bunch of people, and Doc, who introduced me to not whole new genres, but whole new areas of those genres, and whole new actors and things like that. And like I said before, I had dipped my toe into this era before, but I have watched way more of it over the last 10 years than I ever had beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you'll find that when you start your own podcast and you run out of your area to really like watch and focus on,
right?
Then you'll expand yourself or expand your viewing and go off into some weird little areas, for which I hope you'll ask Mo or I what you should be checking out. Cause,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cause I mean, like, something like Q the Winged Serpent you probably haven't seen. So it's not like, it's not because these movies are African American. It's just that these movies are weird 70s genre films that you haven't got into.
Yeah, and I don't venture into 70s or earlier very often. It's usually 80s and later that I'm looking at.
What about stuff like the movie brat stuff? So stuff like the Scorsese and the Coppola and De Palma and things like that. Do you even kind of go back to the 70s with those kind of movies, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, the only one that comes to mind right off the bat when you say Scorsese is Taxi Driver. So, I mean, I love Taxi Driver. Can you give me some examples of De Palma and
Well, stuff like I mean, there's the main ones are like Godfather, Apocalypse Now, the Conversation. With De Palma.
Definitely Godfather.
Well, obviously he does Carrie, which everyone knows, but he does like early 80s, he does Dress to Kill, Blowout, Scarface, Body Double, things like that.
Yeah.
Phantom of the Paradise, Obsession, earlier.
Phantom of the Paradise I need to see for sure.
So those kind of films. Who else is sort of in that group? So there are some 70s things you delve into, just not hugely.
Right. Like, I mean, if you go, I just did a Google search for best movies of the 70s, and it brings up like The Exorcist and Jaws and Taxi Driver, Clockwork Orange, and all the normal stuff. But which I've seen most of them. But like Chinatown, I've never watched Chinatown. I've never watched French Connection. I've never watched Dog Day Afternoon. I've never watched The Sting. The Conversation, I've never seen that one. I love Deliverance. I love The Deer Hunter. So I've seen a fair amount, but actually I wouldn't even say that I've seen a fair amount. I've seen, the big ones, but I would definitely like to broaden my horizons when it comes.
Is
like
Coffee,
French Connection? I've never seen French Connection.
Is Coffee or Shaft on that list?
No.
No, it's a fucked up list then. Because I'm not even kidding. Coffee and Shaft, two of the best movies of the 70s, hands fucking down. Shaft for me is up there with any movie that Humphrey Bogart ever made, and I'm not even kidding. And Coffee is, if you want to know why Sigourney Weaver or Linda Hamilton or Cynthia Rothrock or any of those sort of movie kick-ass ladies of the 80s got to do what they were doing, it's Pam Grier. It all emanates from Mother Pam. So you gotta check out some Pam
I got
Grier,
work
dude.
to do.
Oh, dude.
But I mean, it has like, this list has Grease, 3 Days of the Condor, Last Tango in Paris, Eraserhead, Serpico, which I loved, MASH, Saturday Night Fever.
See, to me, having Saturday Night Fever and Grease on that list and not having Coffee or Shaft on that list, let alone Slaughter and Hell Up in Harlem and some of the others, that to me shows you how critics, certainly, and I fucking hate 99.9% of critics, critics certainly do not consider this a critic-worthy era, and they are talking out of their ass. They really are, because to put fucking Grease on a list and not put fucking Shaft, like, that's just stupid. That is just hands down stupid. Grease is iconic. I'm not knocking Grease, but I'm saying if you're going to go top like 20 movies of the 70s, you know, put fucking Shaft on there, you're an idiot. That's my point. Anyway, so sorry, back to Black Gunn. So, what are the scenes that stick out to you from the movie, and what is it that really? Oh, gosh. What did you and Dina like about it when you finished and you both like looked at each other? What was the like things you were talking about?
I think the thing that stuck out the most for us when we were done was that it was just different than. It was different than all the other movies that we watched together. I mean, most of the movies that we watched together are new films. And I have been showing her a lot of films from the 80s because she's a little bit younger than I am, and missed out on all that good shit. So I've been showing her a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I mean,
do you think you guys will sit and watch movies from this era together again? Was she like, wow, I need to see a few more of these things?
I didn't get that kind of reaction.
Okay.
I did. I'm definitely gonna seek out more and watch more. I think it'll be one of those things where I'll be doing it on my own from here on out. But she didn't loathe the experience, if I can say that.
It's all right, dude. I totally and utterly get it. There are some films I watch that Kim's like, really? Okay, I'm not watching this. And look, and there are other
nice
movies
to have her there watching with me.
Of course, no, I get it. Our ladies do what they can, and then they go off and do their own thing if they don't want to be bothered. I get it. I totally get it. There are movies I can sit and watch with Kim, and she absolutely adores, that I've never been able to sit and watch with any other woman. So that is, to me, priceless. So the fact that occasionally I watch movies that she like rolls her eyes at and walks away, I'm like, that's fine. Most people have that, like most guys and women have that with almost every fucking movie the guy wants to watch, you know what I mean? So it is what it is. But I'm feeling from you that like Black Gunn didn't speak to you in quite the same way that Black Belt Jones did.
Yeah, I think Black Belt Jones had the martial arts thing going for it, and I had a history with martial arts movies, and Black Gunn was it was almost kind of a noir film in a way.
It is definitely, it's a neo-noir, yeah.
And I don't have a lot of experience with noir movies, so that could have had something to do with it. I mean, I did enjoy it, but yeah, Black Belt Jones to me was just like, when I was thinking about it, I was like, man, like this would have been the kind of movie in that era if I was a young, I don't know, I feel so weird saying this, but
well, if you were like a young black guy.
If I was a young black guy that even had some like young kids or whatever, I was like, oh, let's go see this, man. Like Jim Kelly's a great Jim Kelly's a good role model in this movie. You know what I mean? Like he kicks ass. I don't know. He's like a good hero. I would like
in Black Belt Jones or in Black Gunn?
In Black Belt Jones.
Right.
And it would have been like, I just felt like it was that kind of movie that I would have been able to take my family to on like a Saturday afternoon and go have fun at the movies.
Yeah. Whereas Black Gunn is like an adult movie. It's an adult movie from start to finish. It deals with adult things, and it's, people either like something like Death Wish or they don't. You know what I mean? And this certainly has more in common with the first couple of Death Wish. Obviously, by the time like Death Wish 3 and 4 come along, they're way more ludicrous and stupid and over the top and more like the action movies of the 80s. But this definitely has something in common with those earlier movies. It's not, but it's also not quite as arty as something like a Taxi Driver or. It's not as thinky. But it has its moments, and it's interesting to see the different levels of politics and society. I think the thing where Black Gunn to me isn't wholly successful is that while it does examine the different aspects of African American culture that's happening at the time, and certainly different aspects of their politics, it doesn't. It doesn't offer a lot of reasons beyond the simplistic, and it doesn't offer much solution. It just simply observes and uses those particular things that were going on at the time as a springboard for what is essentially a basic vengeance story.
Right.
And to me, I find that it's better when they try and interweave that aspect of it more, rather than just be like, well, this is the characters and now off we go and there's going to be vengeance and da-da-da-da-da. But saying that, like, the action sequences are well done, the soundtracks are always impeccable.
Oh, hell yeah.
Jim Brown is a great actor, a lot of charisma. His lady in the film, and I forget, is it Brenda Sykes?
Yeah.
Who plays Judith? Is wonderful in the film. And it's one that I would strongly suggest, but it's not one that I would say to people start with that. It just is, and it is because it's a little slow. It is because it's a little serious, and it is because I don't think it's quite I don't think it's quite there yet in terms of blending genre with message. But I would always suggest Slaughter over Black Gunn if you want to see a Jim Brown movie of this era. I mean, obviously Jim Brown shows up. He's one of the earlier actors to come out of sports and things. He's in Dark of the Sun, The Dirty Dozen, obviously, Ice Station Zebra, a lot of other movies, El Condor and things, before he gets into... So by the time he's in Slaughter, he's actually been in the movie business almost 10 years.
Yeah.
So Black Gunn is... he is able to dip into and then come out of the era in a different way than most, I think, because he already had that Hollywood background of being in
a couple of big movies, honestly,
huge movies, yeah. So it's interesting, but at least I suppose in the Blaxploitation era, he gets to be a lead. Which he doesn't get in those earlier films.
Right.
In those earlier films, he's certainly incredibly noticeable and very commanding in his performances, but he gets to be a lead, I guess. But if I was going to say to someone, watch an action movie with Jim Brown in it where he's the lead, I would go Slaughter over Black Gunn every time. And then I would actually follow it up with Three the Hard Way, even before Black Gunn. But that's because... like we were saying earlier, I'm more, for entertain me.
Yeah.
Like, I like a good, entertaining movie. And Black Gunn is a bit slow in places and a bit serious in places and a little bit convoluted in places, so that it doesn't quite have the flow that some of the other movies have.
Yeah, and Three the Hard Way has the triple threat, man. Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, and Jim Kelly.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Expendables of Blaxploitation era. So if you're like Three the Hard Way, dude, that's for you. You need to...
That'll be the next one I watch, probably.
You need to check that out. They did a couple. They did Three the Hard Way and One Down, Two to Go, which also then introduces Richard Roundtree. So
nice.
You get Richard Roundtree, Jim Kelly, Jim Brown, Fred Williamson from a movie by Fred Williamson and directed by Fred Williamson, One Down, Two to Go, which then starts to involve people like the wonderful Joe Spinell and stuff like that as well. But no, Fred... long before other people, Fred realized that if they were going to continue to be successful, because around 75, basically, the Hollywood studios pulled the plug on these movies.
Yeah.
To the extent that they were, to the extent that they were a couple of years earlier, they basically pulled the plug because they start to make money again, and the studios are like, okay, we don't need African American audiences anymore because our movies are making money again. Funny enough, once the sort of movie brats of stuff like Star Wars and Jaws and things like that start happening, these movies fall away. However, Fred continues with Take the Hard Ride, One Down, Two to Go, and things like that, where he suddenly realizes, well, wait a minute, why don't we put 3 or 4 of us in this film? Like, that's the way we're going to continue to be successful. And he sees it with Take the Hard Ride, which is a Western that they do. It's a spaghetti Western that they all do with Lee Van Cleef. And again, you have Jim Kelly, Fred Williamson, Jim Brown, and Lee Van Cleef in a movie. Like, and that's what I mean. Like, when people start to delve into these films, it's like, seriously, guys, look him up, because if you like mad spaghetti Westerns, well, here's one with fucking Fred Williamson, Jim Kelly, Jim Brown, and Lee Van Cleef in it. Like, why wouldn't you want to fucking see that film, So that's kind of why I go on and on about these films as much as I do, because I want people to kind of delve in. I think you're right about Black Gunn. I like it, but I'm not overwhelmed by it. It's not one that I'm gonna go out and tell people you must watch. But dude, you've been a hell of a sport, and I hope I've made a convert, and you're going to go on and watch some more. And I want you to come back next time you're on the show and report to me what you've seen. So I will be taking notes, and I will be watching you very closely, Toomey.
All right, man. Anytime you want me, I'm here. And yeah, I mean, now that I have the Brown Sugar streaming service, I think I'll probably check out at least a couple more. And
definitely,
perhaps even continue on after my free week trial.
Yeah, well, you should tweet Brown Sugar. I'm not even kidding. You should actually do this. Tweet Brown Sugar and say, hey, After Movie Diner introduced me to your app, and I'm loving it, or something like that.
I'll do it. I will do it.
See what they say. It's only like $3 or $4 or something once the...
yeah, it's super cheap. I think it's $3.99.
$3.99 once the full thing, and it's got a good chunk of movies on there, and they're adding to it all the time. So I'm gonna...
I want to see more genre stream channels like that. Like Shudder is awesome, and Brown Sugar looks cool. I want to see some other ones.
Me too. I want one that is 80s and 90s action movies that I curate. Like, I want one that's like... We have all the Jeff Speakman movies. We have all the Lorenzo Lamas movies. We all have all the... like, I want all that stuff. Like, not Stallone and Schwarzenegger, because they're readily available. Everyone's seen those.
Offbeat. I want offbeat stuff, quote unquote. Offbeat.
I want the 80s. I want the Dr. Action video streaming service. That's basically what I want. And I will kill everyone till I get it. That's how I'm feeling right now. But no, Scott, thank you ever so much for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Always a good sport, always a legend, and you always have an interesting take on things. And I hope you go on and watch a lot more.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, dude. Take it easy.